Fireside Chats with Shaylee. Pick one.
Okay, so in the cabin we found this laminated page, and it's the Kowaliga story. And so we thought we'd sit down and read a little bit from this. So it says that this is the story as told to us by Bob McKinnon, who AMC's the Cowbell Club, Bob's Ballroom from WRFS in Alexander City, Alabama Daily. So I'm guessing he was a radio jockey or something. But so this is his story. And it says, on Saturday morning, August 15th, 1952, Hank Williams' mother, Mrs. W.W. Stone, called me saying that Hank was extremely tired and wanted to get away for a week's rest. Since Hank and I had often discussed a stay in my cabin on Lake Martin, I was very happy to hear that he was ready to come and spend a week with me. Right at that time, my cabin was rented, so rather than bother those people, I called a local automobile dealer friend of mine, Darwin Dobbs, and made arrangements to use his cabin. So the guy telling this story was friends with Hank, and then he called his friends, and that's whose cabin this is. Theoretically. Is that what I'm getting? Is that kind of
supposedly
the story that we're hearing? Okay. After arranging to be away from the station, Darwin and I met Hank about noon that Saturday. We had met him first about a year before while in Nashville on a weekend of football trip. It was at that time that our original invitation had been given to Hank to come to Lake Martin. After picking up some groceries, linens, and fishing equipment, we drove out to the cabin and got set for rest and vacation. The cabin is situated so that the setting sun was magnified in indescribable color on the waters of the lake. And so when we look out this porch, we see the sun rise. So it might be flipped.
No, they were on the other side of the lake.
Oh, they must have been on the other side. Okay. Well, that would make sense because they said that the cabin started here. We had heard that the cabin started here and got moved somewhere else and then brought back by Russell Lance. So that's okay. During our stay, I found that Hank's emotions were the saddest around sunset, and songs would come to his mind during that time most readily. When I saw a pretty color in the sunset, Hank saw hope, faith, broken dreams, cold hearts, and history, and very often it overwhelmed him so much that tears would come to his eyes. Well, you can hear it.
Tears in my beer.
Tears in my beer, yeah. During the days of this week, Hank and I finished wandering through the woods and many times just sat out on the bank of the lake and talked. It was under these circumstances that I told Hank the mythical Kowaliga story, for it had been told to me by many old settlers in the area. Hank seemed to enjoy sitting there with me, reminiscing about tours he had made, songs he had written, his mother, and many other things that were closest to his heart. This is the only time I had ever seen Hank relax with his memories. It was truly a wonderful experience for both of us. One afternoon, just about sunset, Hank mentioned to me, "Bob, this is the lonesomest time of the day." I remember well how he wiped a tear from his eye at the time and remarked that he felt a song building up. So this must be where he's starting to get into Kowaliga, because this is a sad song.
Or I'm so lonesome I could cry.
Oh, there, yes. Oh my gosh, that's literally what that paragraph just said. Literally, you know. That night we drove to town for groceries. All the way in, Hank kept repeating, Kowaliga, Kowaliga. After completing our buying and on the way back to the cabin, he leaned forward and began beating out of rhythm with his hands on the dashboard. It seemed that Hank was in his highest spirits late at night. He never went to bed until late and always felt best during these night hours. As we got out of the car that night, he said, "Bob, I've got it. Let's go in and listen to this song." He sat down with his guitar and sang his first arrangement of Kowaliga to me right there. Although it wasn't in its finished form at the time, it was well on the way to becoming a great song. Here we'll carry on with the story as the publisher. Okay, so that's that was the whole story that the DJ told. And now the publisher is saying, in November, Fred Rose went to Montgomery, Alabama to spend the day with Hank to plan for his next recording session. As usual, Hank sang over several songs he had written. Among others, he sang You're a Cheatin' Heart and Kowaliga for Fred, and they were immediately picked for the session. Hank's original lyric to Kowaliga carried the Indian story on the lake, but Mr. Rose came up with the idea of putting him on the opposite sides of a street as wooden Indians, which would bring the idea or the story up to date. Hank immediately linked the new idea, and the two worked out the new lyric and polished up the arrangement. Very soon after, Hank cut the session in Nashville, and the rest is history. Oh my gosh. Well, that makes sense because we always talked about how you heard that the original Kowaliga story was about a real Indian. The story was it was an Indian waiting on the banks watching for his fair maiden, and then she got married off, and he stood there waiting until he turned to wood. And then I guess this publisher told him to just change it to 2 wooden Indians. Oh, so see, all these different stories are all starting to come together. How interesting. I'm glad we read that. Thanks. Never miss an adventure. Like and follow Pelican Point Expeditions on YouTube, Facebook, and Instagram. And stay tuned for our next episode on Lake Martin TV.